So there's a couple of examples, couple of different ways you can bring in text or logos into your model to add the detail. Primarily it depends on what the detail is on your object. Okay, so some objects might just have text sort of printed on the outside. So the hose head, can you just hold that up? It's got a Holman logo, if you can see over here. On the outside, there's no indentation, okay? It's just sort of printed on the surface, right? So the way you do that is a little bit different to one which is embossed or debossed into a surface. So we'll go through a couple of examples, and I'll show you a little bit in Illustrator about how to edit artwork or edit line work, and then export and import into SolidWorks as well. So the first example we've got is from Ryland. So he sent me across his headphone. So this is a skull candy sort of earpiece on the outside, and what this will have on this area here is the skull icon of their brand. Okay, so that is, if we have a look, I've got it open in Illustrator. I'll just bring that down. So what we've got on that earpiece is this skull icon. So first thing I had to do is find this artwork. Okay. So one website which I've used for a while, it's free and it's got a lot of logos in vector formats, is called brandsoftheworld.com. So you can register for free, just need your email. I don't get any spam or anything like that from them. Vectors or vector images are images that have the line work in them. So the difference between a vector image and non-vector, non-vector images are pretty much pixels, okay, like JPEG images. I'll show you what a JPEG image looks like when you bring it into SolidWorks. So, into Illustrator. I've got some examples here. So the RMIT logo, which we've used previously for in our drawing set, okay, in the one that I'd set up. At this resolution, the image looks fine, but when I select it and try and go through the detail in Illustrator, you can see I'm just getting to a linked file, linked image place where I'm basically stopped. And as you zoom in, you can start to see the difference. Okay, this is what a JPEG or a non-vector image will look like when you get it in to try and edit it. All right, so you can't select the line work. I will come back to that one. So we're looking for vector files. So on Brands of the World, I search skull candy. Came up with a few different logos. What Ryland's got on the outside of the headphone looks a lot like this one, so I grabbed that one. Now, what we're looking for vector format is AI or EPS, both of which can be opened by Illustrator. CDR, which is Corel Draw, different file, can't be opened by Illustrator. Most vector formats, most vector files you'll find on this website will be something like that you can use. So I downloaded that, saved that, and opened Illustrator. So many of you guys used Illustrator before, some never. No, never. All right, so this is, when I first was learning sort of CAD and computer design type stuff, Illustrator was the first thing I learned back in year 10. It's like, how old am I now? 15 years ago. And I did my first sort of design projects, like industrial design projects with Illustrator, just 2D. What I liked about it was the ability to just move things around, and obviously that's a lot more advanced in things like SolidWorks. Nowadays, Illustrator's used by graphic designers and people in those sort of industries, but it's still really good as a presentation tool or for creating artwork or editing artwork. So in a lot of my roles where I have to knock something up for a client, they will not supply us artwork or are too slow getting it. So I'll just go on the web, search for some stuff. I might grab some images or stock images and put something together in Illustrator. So it's definitely a useful tool to learn. I'm just going to show you some very basic stuff now. But yeah, if you have time, I definitely recommend it if you're interested in CAD, because being able to interchange files like we are here from one software to another is important, and Illustrator's one of the good ways of doing that with line work. So I download the file, and when I select it, once it's opened up, you can see the line work highlighted, okay, with that blue. So in Illustrator, what we have, menu at the top, tools on the side. The V key will get your arrow selection tool up. And here you have your fill and line color or stroke. Now you can flick those by hitting Shift X, okay, while you've got something selected. So if you've got an image and you hit Shift X and you can see the line work or the fill switch to the stroke, then you know that that's a vector image that you can use in SolidWorks. Now what we want here is just that skull. Alright, so at the moment it's grouped, so I'm going to ungroup. So I can right click ungroup, or I can go Control Shift G with it selected. Now ungroup, okay, get rid of that and just focus on this. Now the other thing that will help before I bring it into SolidWorks is to get it to the right scale. So if you've got your object in front of you, obviously you can measure how big that logo or icon is. In this case, I've got this area here where you can see dimension of 29. Okay, so it's going to fit that area. So in Illustrator, I can create an ellipse and make that, this is in the wrong units, so I can just go to units, change everything to millimeters. Create an ellipse that is 29 by 29. Now here's another trick. So this is an artboard. I can get that artboard to fit the size of this circle while it's filled by going Object, Artboard, Fit to Selected Art. Okay. Then I can, or later, I will delete that circle before I export it. So I can grab that image and I can just go to Window, Align, and I just want this to align to the center. And when I click on that image, I can also up the top see the size of that. I can see it's 18 by 23. Now I want to link those sizes together, make that height 29. Okay, you see it's now filling that space. So on the actual headpiece, it's a little bit smaller, and it's off to the side here as well. Now that's useful, again, because I want to actually edit it before I take it in Illustrator. So what I'm going to do now, I'm going to try and use Pathfinder, if I can find it. Oh, here it is. And just get the intersecting area. Okay, so that cuts away that area on the outside. So I used intersect. Okay, and gives me that circle edge. So that circle edge as well is going to be that 29mm radius or diameter. So that's now ready to export. Now before I export it, I just want to shift it back to the line work. And just get rid of that. All right, so all I've got is this image. all these lines. And I go File, Export, Export As, and DXF or DWG file. So export, make sure your units are right. So scale's 1:1, 1 millimeter is 1 unit. Press OK. All right, and that's going to save as a DXF file. So now in here, I'm going to import it. So I want to import it facing this direction. You can't import it onto a curved face. What you need to do is just select a plane. You know, right, top, front plane, doesn't really matter, but to save time, I'll get it facing the right way. Select the plane, and then go Insert, DXF, DWG, and browse to that file, and press Open. It'll pop up this little window. We want to import as a 2D sketch. Press Next. You can see the line work. Change the unit to whatever you exported as, millimeters. Press Next and Finish. It'll sometimes pop up with something about blocks. Happy to explode blocks, just say yes. And when I zoom out, you can see us over here. Now it's actually back to front. All right, but what I can do is just create a line, do mirror, select those lines, mirror about, and there we go. Delete the original. And so that's pretty good now. The other thing that you can do sometimes to help, and I probably should have left this in, is keep that circle in your sketch. It just means that when I import it, I've got a center point already there. I know the position already. Also, if you've got like a logo that's going to be centered on something that's not circular, you can have a square outlining it. All right, that square, you're able to, again, to pick midpoints from those lines on the outside. Does that make sense? Yeah. Okay. So, so what you can see, those little ellipses, that part of that circle here, that's now changed to a spline. Most of these lines are actually splines in this object. Right, so not really easy for editing, and again, not great for trying to move, as you can see what happened there. So when you have something like this that you bring in, you need to turn it into what's called a block. So you can turn on blocks on your toolbar, right click, go blocks. And blocks are essentially groups in SolidWorks. So you can select that line work, press block, press OK, and it'll turn that line work grey, and you can see in your featured tree, it'll come up as block 1-1. Now that block you can click on and you can save. So if it's something you're going to use over and over again, you can just save it on your hard drive and just load it in. All right, so if you've got doing work with logos in it that you've designed, doing a new design of something, just go to your blocks, insert block, logo, bang. The good thing about blocks, you can select them, and in your properties on the left, you can change the scale and the angle. So if you want a bigger or smaller version, you can just move them up or down here. All right, so I'm going to grab that and drag it over here. And I'm just going to snap that top line there, and this one here, and then that's, by getting 2 points to sort of that outside circle in the right spot, that's now pretty much in the right position. Okay. So you can see that's on the front plane. That doesn't really matter. All that matters is the position of that. So now on this object, on this thing, it's just a print on the surface. So all I want to do is separate those faces. So with the sketch, I'm going to go curves, split line, select this face, press OK. And there you can see it separated those faces. So this will come into effect next week. So next week, one of the things we'll look at is some rendering and how to apply materials and cameras and stuff like that. When it's a split face, I'm able to add different materials to those different faces. The key thing here though, if I just copy these materials and paste, so it's all the same material, if we imagine this as a 3D print now that we've printed, it's going to come out like this, all right, because there's no difference in the surface, all right? There's a split line we could see in SolidWorks, but to a 3D print, it's all the same, it's all solid. So if I wanted to 3D print this and have that detail showing, you have to change the surface a little bit. So there's a couple of ways of doing that. A quick way that we'll just try now is with Move Face. So that can be done under Insert, Features, it might be, sorry, I think I'll have to find it here. So it's Features, Move Face. So with Move Face you can offset, and I'm just going to offset like 0.2 of a millimeter. Doesn't always work, as you can see there. If your offset's going to impede other areas, then it's going to cause problems. So we can try another way. I'm going to try to offset the surface, 0.2. So that creates a new surface body. And then that surface body I'm going to thicken, 0.2. And reverse that direction so it goes back down. Merge result, yes. Okay, so that's worked. And so now when we look at that, you know, shaded, you can see that sort of raised detail. All right, even though it's all the same color and material. Okay, so that's the first example of bringing logos or artwork in. The second one we'll look at a little bit different. So this is, there's a few people that have these calipers cases here. I think it's called Work Zone. Now this is one where I had a search for a logo on Brands of the World, nothing came up. I had a search on the web, you know, just on Google, just trying to find a Work Zone branded website, because often you can download images off websites to use for your logos. So, yeah, pools. So in my last job, previous work where we did point of sale stuff, did something for this brand, the guys we were dealing with didn't have their actual vector logo to send us. But I was able to go through, I think, their brochures or their website here to find maybe a PDF file that I could download that had the logo in it, insert that PDF into Illustrator, break it up and get the line work out. So often you can do that if you can find a website with a proper logo or some sort of PDF official document. So I was unable to do that, so the next best thing I could do was take a photo of the actual object. So you can see it here, Work Zone. So a little bit different in Illustrator this time. I'll just create a new doc. Just create a new file and just click and drag that image in. So that's huge. Let's take it on my phone. Just scale it down. So if you hold Shift and Alt, it'll scale from the center. So you can obviously measure how big that is. So here I've measured it roughly, I've guessed it's 70 by 24. So I can set up my artboard to that size. So edit artboard, and it's going to be 70 wide by 24 high. And so then I can just grab this, and here's another trick. If I draw a box over this shape and select them both and go Control Z, it's going to crop it. So then I can select that and actually put in the dimensions. So I might put in just the width 70 and the height 23. So I was pretty close with my guess. And align that. All right, so this time we don't have any text or logo to import. So what I was going to show with the RMIT logo, one of the tricks that you can try if you just have a JPEG image is called trace, where you can trace and expand the image. So to do that, we go Object, Image Trace. So you got to have it selected. We can go up here, Image Trace, and there's different options. So it might be black and white logo that you try, or line art, or a tech drawing, or 3 colors. So we'll try black and white logo. All right, so it's traced it. To actually get the vector line work, you then press Expand. All right, now I'm going to ungroup, delete the background, delete the whites. So this is what I'm left with now, the line work. The issue with the trace is that usually it's not quite perfect around the edges. All right, if we bring in a copy of that logo again, just have a look. So you can see here, like the eye, for instance, across the bottom of that, it's a bit sort of saggy. We look over here, that's probably like a straight line. So it's not always perfect, that trace. But you can play around with the settings when you're using that tool. So you can go Object, Image Trace, Make. Sorry. Text wrap, Image Trace, Make and Expand. There's somewhere where you can play with those settings. Anyway, not going to worry about that too much now. Look that up later. But having that line work helps. So if you've got like a sort of pretty clear logo, you're usually able to do that. When I try something like this, so Image Trace, because it's cropped, it won't actually let me do it. Yeah, that's not going to work. What I wanted to show with this one though was just the ability that you can then take text and look through the different fonts available. So under type at the top and font will be all the system fonts. So if you're able to find something that's close to what your text is, it can save you a lot of time sort of editing it and setting it up. So I'm just going to see if I can find something that's going to be pretty blocky. Sans serif, which means there's no sort of curly bits on the letters. Looking for impact. Impact's a pretty fat sort of text without much in the way of curly bits. Okay, so that font I can use. I can just change that to a different color, or even make that white. I can change the opacity a little bit just while I'm trying to get the lettering right. All right, can adjust, can squeeze it up both ways. Now, that's not really that close. The other thing that I can do on my layers, okay, with this layer on the bottom, I can make that a template. Okay, so that fades it out a little bit. So with this text, that text, as you'll see, is not editable. As far as I don't have the line work accessible to do anything with it. But how you can change text to be editable is to select it, go to type, and then press create outlines. All right, so that turns that text from editable text, where you can change it on the keyboard, to now it's line work. So I can right click, go ungroup, and now you can see all the different points on those letters. So if I hit Shift X to flip it, and I'll just turn this one off from template so I can see it a bit clearer. With these lines, I can hit the letter A, which gives me this direct selection tool, and I can grab this line work to move it around manually. All right, so if I want to reposition these letters to move them in or out, I can do it. Where there's lines like here, for instance, if I want to remove that, I can just delete that point, press P, use the pen tool to draw a line between those two. There are different ways that basically you can create your own artwork there to be able to then export and import. It might be easier doing it in Illustrator, or if it's easy enough text and logo, you might be able to just import that image into SolidWorks and then sketch over the top of it. All right. Okay, so the last thing I want to look at is just some different options in SolidWorks when you have that when you have a logo ready to import, if you want to emboss or deboss. So for that, I'm just going to look at an object here. I'll just open it up. Okay, one. All right, so a Sonos speaker. So this has, at the moment, it's just got a logo sitting on this front face. And you can see how that's done. I've got in there a sketch with a block. Okay, and that block, I've just used a center point here between the N to get a midpoint so it's centered. And you can see the scale of that. I've also scaled that block up or down, okay, to get to that to the right size and proportions. All right, so first up, if we wanted to use, I'm going to just copy and paste that block for use at different places. If I've got a circular shape, okay, let's say I've got a cylinder that comes up here. And I'll just give that a dimension so we can change that later. Alright, so if I want to add that split line or that logo onto this object, I'm just going to reposition, bump up the size. When we've got something like this and I want to add that logo to this surface, the limitation with using the split line tool is that it's going to distort. Right, so if the part that I'm putting it onto the surface of is small enough, you know, or curved enough, we can see how that S around the edge is starting to really stretch out. Okay, whereas the end's fine because that's directly on the front, but the other ones are starting to really curve around the sides. And if we go too small, you can see it's starting to cause bigger problems there. So that split line doesn't always work. So there are some other options that you can use. The first option is called wrap. So on your features toolbar, there's wrap up the top. We select wrap. And this gives you 3 options, and these are the 3 that we talk about most, so emboss, deboss and scribe. So scribe is just like the split line that we've done. So it'll just create 2 separate faces. So all I have to do is select the sketch, select the face. Now if you've got sort of 2 faces that are selected because it's circular, okay, or it's tangent all the way around, you can flip the direction if you want to go front or back. But what you can see the difference is, compared to the projected view, which is what the split line curve does, the wrap tool actually keeps it in the same proportions. So using the exact same sketch as that, instead of stretching it around the edges, it actually keeps it in the right proportions to match that curve. So if we increase this shape here, it's still going to have the same proportions, whether or not it's really sharp or not so sharp. There can be limitations to what sort of shape that wrap tool will work on. We'll get to that in a sec. The other ones I just want to touch on, so the emboss and deboss. So they're pretty good as well. Again, you just need to select the thickness. So emboss, 1 mil, let's make it 2 millimeter, press OK. And you can see that's basically extruded out from that face. Deboss will do the opposite, that'll cut in to the object. So what you can see those is each of those letters, it's perpendicular to the face that it's coming from. So they don't share the same angle. So this is not how it would be manufactured, because in manufacturing, you'd have a tool that comes from one direction. And what this does is this creates undercuts. Okay, so this area here where it sort of cuts into the body, that's an undercut. So it's not manufacturable with a tool that is coming off this front direction. But visually, it looks good. So you just have to be aware of the differences there.
If the whole unit was being rotated while the router was cutting the holes?
Oh, well, if it's done that way, yes. But typical objects wouldn't be manufactured that way. They'd be injection molded.
Okay.
With a tool which would just pull off in 2 directions. So the limitations on this wrap tool, sometimes doesn't work so well on faces that aren't perfect circles. Okay, so try with the ellipse instead. We'll see if that works. Right, that looks okay. The other one I like to try is with a spline. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. Just like to remind myself. Press OK. Oh, cancel. Delete that one. All right, that's working pretty well. Okay, so it's a nice way to get those sort of logo details onto different types of surfaces and shapes. So, you know, key thing to remember, your sketch doesn't have to be on that face, it just needs to be facing the right direction, you know, on one of those surrounding planes. All right, so that wraps that up. Are there any questions about any of these tools? No? Okay, cool. All right, guys, so last thing to talk about tonight. Who knows where they're getting their stuff 3D printed? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6.
I'm a maybe.
Maybe. Okay, 6 people know where they're getting it 3D printed. Who has sent off their stuff for 3D printing? 1? Forgot. So who hasn't looked into it at all? It's all right. You got time, but it's running out. Okay, it's running out. I know, it's good fun. So the workshop site, I'm helping you here, I'm giving you a hand. Workshop site, 3D printing. How long will it take? Payment pickup, alternatives. Okay, there's options there. To compare prices of commercial 3D printing services, upload a file to this site. What's that? 3D printing price check. Oh, shut down 20. That's pretty recent too.
Yeah.
Damn.
Jonas. I don't know.
Sorry, that's a shame. Anyway, there's some options there at places that you can get things done. This last demo is just a short one, just to help you with exporting or editing the files before you're going to send them off. Okay, so the basic idea behind this is if you've got an object that is solid or has is already shelled out but might be too thin, so it's one way or the other. You might have a really small object which you can just print solid, no problem. Okay, but if you've got a larger object, you don't want to print all that extra volume because it takes extra time or it might cost you more. So if you want to remove material or bump up the thickness, that's the two things that I'm going to show you here. So to start off, I'm just basing this around my object here, which is just a basic, 3D body, but there's a lot of volume in this. I haven't hollowed it out or I haven't shelled it. Okay. So we know how to use the shell tool. Features shell, and you put in your thickness and press preview. Now if you've done that for your object already and you've measured your object and it's a 1.5mm thickness or 1mm or something like that, and you're 3D printing and the 3D printers or their website suggests a minimum of 3mm, then you need to change your objects. Now what I would like you to do is keep your model exactly as per your object. Save a copy specific for the 3D printing. So you've got one file which is as close to the replica as you can be. That's the file you can continue to work on, and that's the one that you'll be submitting in week 14. For your 3D print, you just need the 3D print to work. All right. Obviously, or hopefully you put some thought into how you're going to present it, how it's going to work with the other parts. If it's something that needs to fit with other parts, then think about, all right, if I need to bump up the thickness, can I bump it up on the inside or can I bump it up on the outside? Where do I need to go with that? So there's a couple of basic tools that we can sort of use to help with those sort of things. The first thing I'm going to show is just surface offset and surface cut. So this is my shape. Now let's say it's actually, for whatever reason, I haven't been able to shell it, but I want to remove a bunch of material on the inside. Now this can happen if your object has a lot of small fillets or cuts or angles, and the fillet doesn't want to compute, okay? Or it's just a bad surface. One thing you can try is to do a surface offset. So you turn on your surfaces tab and you go offset surface and you select the faces that you want to offset. Now my aim here is to create a surface on the inside of my object. All right, so it'll look like this. Okay, I'll create that surface. I can then extend the bottom out and actually use this to remove a bunch of material. So you can see the surface offset there, it's on the inside. I'll just make this transparent so you can see it. So that's my offset. I can then isolate that surface and I can use extend surface, select that bottom edge, select propagate, which goes all the way around, and that'll extend it down. Right, now, sometimes you might have to use different settings for the end condition or a different distance. To get this to work, it just needs to go past the existing part of current solid body. Alright, so extend surface, so it extends down, and you can see, okay, my solid body on the outside, my surface on the inside. So on my surfaces tab, cut with surface, I select the surface, select the arrow, So if I want to remove the material on the inside of the object, I leave it pointing in, press OK, and I'm going to hide that, make that not transparent, and you can see it's removed that material. So that material is offset from the outside. This is like a shell tool, okay, just slightly different in the way we've gone about creating it. So the next one from that is, okay, what if I need to bump up the thickness? All right, and what if editing the shell tool again doesn't work? All right, another option you have is to use what's called move face. So I looked at this one, or I've shown a few different people this tool before. Move face can be used in a few different ways. It can be used to extend faces out. Now those faces need to be basically an endpoint. So if I had an extrude here, I could select move face, select this face on the end and go offset, okay, and I could extend that face, okay, or I could cut it the other way. All right, you can also rotate and you can offset. So the offset one is the one we're going to use. So I've already got this thickness on my object here. If I want to make that a little bit thicker, I can press move face, offset. Let's say I want to bump it up by 2 millimeters. If I want to do it on the inside, I can right click on the inside, press select tangency. That'll select everything that's connected and smooth. And you can see the preview, what it's going to do is going to move all those faces in 2 millimeters. Okay, so that bumps up the thickness. Alternatively, I want to go on the outside, right click, select tangency, they'll select all the faces on the outside, and again you can see that preview, how it's bumping up that thickness. Okay. Alright, so you know, that's one way of manipulating your file. Another way is with combinations of solid bodies. So we haven't used this tool much yet, but it's used in a lot of other software as a means to remove material from solid bodies. What I'm going to do is use a couple of tools, so I'm going to put them up on my toolbar here. The first one is move copy body. Also going to add up combine, delete body, and split. So move copy lets me select the body, press translate rotate copy, okay, and I can actually create a copy of that across to one side. Okay, so that's one way of using it. Second way of using it, select copy, don't actually move anywhere, just press the tick, and it will just create a copy of the same body in its existing position. So this is another sort of pseudo shell tool. I can select that body, and the other one I'll put up here under mold tools is, looking for scale. So I can scale that body. I'll just hide the first one. So scale, and let's say I want to make it a tiny bit smaller, I can go to 0.9. So 90% for the scale factor. It's going to shrink it down. Turn on the outer body, change transparency. So you can see I've got one on the inside and one on the outside. If I want to remove that material of the inside one, I can use the combine feature, and I've got add, subtract, or common. So I can subtract the main body. I'm going to subtract the scaled version and show preview. You can see the preview is showing me very similar to a shell tool. Again, different way of removing material. The trick, or one of the good things or keys with that scale tool, this is uniform scaling. but you can actually scale at different numbers. So if over the y-axis I actually wanted to make it bigger, keep x the same and z just go to 0.8, I can do that. Oh, does it come back? But that's a way that you can change some geometry as well to then easily remove one material from another.
Hey Chris.
Yep.
What if I've got like 100 solid bodies?
Then you just repeating the process.
Okay.
What you would try and do, and that's probably the next step, the very last one that I'm going to talk about. We'll just use this as an example here, so I'll just remove that combine. All right, so you've been working along on your model. You've got a lot of different separate solid bodies. When you go to 3D print before you export, those bodies need to be together as one solid body. Ideally, all it takes is using the combine tool and add, and you're selecting those bodies. Now you can either select those bodies manually by clicking on them, or you can open your solid bodies folder and click and hold shift, and it will select all of them in an area. Press OK. Now that's not going to create, because when I've selected this body that's out to the right, because it's not connected in any way, okay, it's not going to add them to one solid body. So I've got to remove that one, and then I can combine these two. The other way that I can combine these, all right, if it's too difficult to just select them all, another way of doing it is to sketch, and let's say you've got them all patterned around a circle. If you can sketch something that's going to intersect all of those bodies and the main one you want to join them to, and just do a feature extrude. All right. So long as that extrude passes through both of those bodies and you've got merge result on, that's going to join them together as well and put them back to one solid body. If there's a solid body that you don't want to be included, then when you go back to editing that feature and look at the feature scope here, down the bottom, you can just uncheck or delete the body that you don't want it merging with. Okay. So you get to your 3D print stage, and now the body I want to 3D print is this one here. All right. So before I export my file, I want to get rid of all the other solid bodies or surfaces that I'm not going to use. So this is where we can use delete or keep body. If you've just got the one body you want to keep, then press keep bodies, select that body, and press OK, and it will remove everything else. All right. If you want to check, do a quick sort of SolidWorks check of that body and the design, just have a quick look with a wireframe just to see that there's no accidental gaps on the inside or errors or surfaces that look a bit weird. You may want to try and fill those in or remove those before you go to that next step of exporting. Once you're happy with all that, for exporting your file, file save as, all you have to do is basically pick that file type that you need for your 3D print. So SolidWorks should really have everything covered. The ones that I expect you might use would be XT files, IGES files, step files, or STL files. Okay, but that, again, that's up to you to discuss or find out from your 3D printer. When you click on those, some of them will have options. So STL, you press options. You can see there's some information here about the output, the resolution, show STL file before saving, preview. So there's a few things that you can play around with. You don't need to touch this here, but This is to do with the resolution. So STL is like a mesh style file. So that's what it's doing here, converting into a mesh, and you can see the triangulation of all those surfaces. But I think that covers most of it. Key is to just make sure that you've got, that solid body, your wall thickness covered, all right, and any other parts that it needs to match with, you've already taken care of that. There's other software that you can use if you've got a more complex model for checking. If you go through these steps here on this website, these steps to prepare your files, it may have in there a mesh checking software like Magix. There's a few other different ones, but that can help check your 3D print file as well before you do send it off to a supplier.